Hello everybody! Welcome to the Green Innovation Day, an event organized by IBS Americas with the support of universities of the United States of America and Europe. So, you probably were following the news last week when global leaders met at the General Assembly of the United Nations in New York City with all attention devoted to one thing only: environment, how we are treating our planet, and what we should be doing now to avoid a catastrophe, of course, if we still have time to do that. So now look at the numbers I'm showing you in your screens. We throw in the ocean 8 million tons of plastic every year, and if we keep doing this, in 30 years there will be more plastic than fish in the oceans around the world. What are we doing to the air? Pretty much the same. Total carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuels and industry have climbed to a record 37 gigatons of CO2 last year, with just two countries, China and the US, being responsible for more than 40% of the world's CO2 emissions. The results couldn't be less devastating. According to the WHO, more than 4 million people die worldwide every year due to air pollution. Global sea level in 2018 was around 2 to 3 millimeters higher than in 2017, 3 millimeters in 1 year caused by greenhouse effects. This is why we're here organizing this international symposium. We want to invite you to take action in your city, in your company, in favor of our planet. You know that many years, corporate social responsibility used to be seen as a set of rules imposed by governments over companies. Managers associated environmental protection with some additional costs, jeopardizing companies' competitiveness and performance. Fortunately, nowadays we live in a different moment with a different perspective for that, for green companies. So today, managers are looking beyond the narrow technical approach that the question is now, it is not whether it pays to be green, but would rather be when and how does it pay to be green. So in this event, with the help of experts from Europe, US, and Brazil, we will try to understand how companies can see environmental sustainability issues as opportunities to increase their revenues. And we also want to discover with you how companies can create new products, services, and markets that would boost business and solve pollution problems at the same time. So we will try to find out win-win strategies for businesses interested in reducing their environmental footprint and growing their companies at the same time. So these are the questions that are being asked by many companies worldwide, and we would like to know the opinion of our international guests who joined us today for this symposium. You can also send your questions online because your participation will be a contribution to our discussion as well as to your own professional growth. I have here with me in the studio our friend Professor Luis Carnier, a specialist in corporate strategy. Thank you very much for coming today, Professor. And special thanks to you that are tuned in our IBS YouTube channel. I invite you again to send live questions. We will have a Q&A, questions and answer session at the end of this event. And I also invite you to join our Green Innovation competition. You and your group can earn up to $100,000 in scholarships for international programs as an award for the best projects. So let's start our discussion. And now we're going to talk to Professor Simon Hall from Pearson College London. Professor Simon is a specialist in strategic management in IT, telecommunications, and multimedia areas, and a former chief marketing officer at Dell in the UK. He is also a professor of the IBS Americas programs offered in cooperation with Pearson College London. Dear Professor Simon, thank you very much for your participation today. And, as we see nowadays, more and more companies started to implement different sustainable strategies voluntarily without any pressure from the government. So could you please tell us how this transition happened from compliance to a more proactive approach? Could you also give us any examples of green initiatives and companies from developed countries and also from emerging economies?
Hi everyone, Simon. So probably the best way to think about this is take a step back and just to quickly define green innovation or technologies being processes, the technology themselves, business models. Obviously, we're seeing more greener business models. And I guess one good way to look at this is to think about what happened 10, 20 years ago when we regarded companies being green, and basically they would probably put green-based energy emitting lights in, and then they might look at recycling materials. But essentially, it was very much as a response to legislation, a response to a law that had been passed that forced them to actually then do the right thing. And you could call this thing defensive corporate social responsibility. And now we've moved more into, a lot of the companies move more into a very much more proactive, strategic corporate social responsibility. So you could see companies like Dell now in terms of, they have this thing called a legacy of good initiative since a few years. And their idea is that it's not just about responding to law and legislation, but it's actually more about doing the right thing and leaving a legacy, hence the title Legacy of Good. So they're actually looking at probably 10 or 12 different initiatives that border on the whole green area. Looking at water renewal, water usage, energy usage, but also controlling the supplier. So we're also seeing differences between companies and sectors in terms of if they're actually supplying, then they're making sure that the materials they're providing are of a recyclable and green nature. But if you're not a supplier and you're a manufacturer, we're seeing some interesting shifts in terms of companies now auditing suppliers, but also then making sure that as they produce and send things out, they're doing a really good job in terms of recycling and making sure that's maintained. To the point of countries, I think one really interesting thing is we're seeing something called Jugaad innovation occur in emerging markets. And Jugaad innovation is actually dealing with innovating in adversity, and a lot of that is coming around, is all about this sort of green innovation and green type technologies. So we've seen, for example, some interesting innovations using light technology, solar technology. So in countries like Kenya, they now have innovation called M-Kopa, where they can actually literally buy a solar powered kit because most of them live off the electricity grid. So they're using their resource to their advantage, but it's also at the same time very green. If anything, they're probably leapfrogging the developed countries.
Thank you, Professor Simon, for your answer. Indeed, recycling the use of renewable energy sources like solar panels sold by M-Kopa and choosing sustainable suppliers are among the strategies that most of the firms are trying to implement nowadays. But actually, these approaches are often seen as the original pillars of sustainability strategies. And of course, they're still valid and useful. But are there any new disruptive technologies, maybe, that could tackle environmental problems in a more efficient way?
Sure. Okay. So I think the good news is we've actually seen a change in the role of technologies themselves supporting sustainability, and it's almost been a step change in the role. So some companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers call this the fourth industrial revolution, and in that they look at 10 areas of technology which are really making a huge difference and will make a huge difference in the coming decades in sustainability. So to give you some examples, one area would be synthetic biology, where the use of bioplastics are being used as alternative to plastics, where they use biomass to actually then be more energy efficient. But there are also some interesting things in sort of agriculture with genome edited plants, which are resistant to climates, resistant to drought. So they're certainly helping those countries that are having difficulties with plants not surviving those areas. And then the area of converting waste to energy. If we move over to artificial intelligence, there are some really interesting machine learning things going on in terms of monitoring land use change to be able to deal with deforestation quickly and understanding where to take action. And then we're also seeing robots being used in different ways to make manufacturing processes a lot more efficient in terms of energy usage, but also in reducing the amount of materials that are being wasted. I think another two areas I'll just mention would be 3D. So we're actually even seeing 3D buildings being used, 3D cars, which are much lighter, more energy efficient, and even things like solar sprays. And then on advanced materials, we're seeing some interesting things like solar sprays, but also super insulating materials that actually improve buildings efficiency. But also on the inverse, we're also seeing heat reducing materials that actually reduce the need for air conditioning, therefore energy.
Okay, you have just mentioned many new technologies that probably require considerable financing as the R&D costs must be very high. Are these technological innovations used mostly by startups or large corporations?
So to come to a question of is it larger enterprise or startups? I think it's a bit of both really. So if we look at sort of large enterprise, we see companies like 3Com in advanced materials really moving forward. We're seeing Pfizer and things like synthetic biology, but we're also seeing these companies work with startups. So if you look at Pfizer, a lot of their artificial intelligence innovations are actually coming out or working with startups. So there's an interesting sort of combination and collaboration going on there. Probably the good news is that startups are actually playing a huge role in the sustainability technology. So take the example of artificial intelligence. Ernst & Young did a report recently where they looked at where most of the innovations were coming from, and they determined it was actually the startups. And a lot of the investments from different areas are going into supporting startups take these innovations forward. So we are actually seeing startups play a huge role in taking this forward. My particular advice to startups would actually almost break down what they wanted to do with sustainability. So is it just that they wanted to be sustainable themselves, therefore look at energy, look at materials they use, look at virtual reality or virtual meetings so to reduce the need for travel, or is it that they have a technology that they're interested to bring to market? Now, if it's in technology or innovation, then the next stage would be, where are the resource challenges? Resource could be finance, people, know-how, even the muscle of actually bringing it to market. If it's finance, there's some really great new actually startup companies that are supporting crowdfunding, some really great initiatives in getting that, as well as investors in different areas that can support that. If it's know-how, then we're also seeing a lot of interesting innovations come out of R&D labs, where startups actually approach university R&D labs and then actually work with them to actually create these innovations. If it's almost like the muscle of actually getting the product to market, then a lot of large enterprises see a real interest and benefit in teaming up with startups to do just that. So certainly look at what is it they want to do, and then where did they see the resource gaps, and there are real solutions around that. And if anything, I think society as well as large enterprises can really benefit from supporting startups go forward.
Professor Simon, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us. It was very important to hear your advice regarding startups, and I'm sure that among our participants there are some who are interested in innovative entrepreneurship or even already work there. So these ideas will spark an interesting debate at the end of our symposium. So these insights are of great importance to us. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to our next speaker from Canada, Stefan Bashan, a specialist in environmental and supply chain management. Professor Stefan currently teaches in the University of Western Ontario, and he was involved in different executive programs in North China Grid Company, Doosan Corporation in South Korea, and Institute of Product Development in Canada. Professor Bashan, it is nice having you today with us. We have just discussed about such green innovations as synthetic biology and 3D printing. You have a huge experience working with supply chain management. So could you give us some information about the concept, which is called closed-loop systems, and maybe some other types of innovations related to green supply chain? Are there any particularly promising ways to make your supply chain more sustainable?
Well, to my mind, the topic of interest, and that is gaining a lot of momentum in the past 2-3 years is certainly the whole aspects of circular economy, which touch upon most of the stuff you mentioned, most of the topic you put in your question. If you want to be in the entire part of the circular economy, you'll need a solid closed loop system. Meaning what? Meaning that you can take your own products back and maybe even product from the competitors and reintroduce them in the system, and avoiding that it goes to the landfill or any other recovery methods out there. You can also have a circular economy that will require products. You call them ecological product, fine. Certainly product that are suitable for this, and there's certainly design protocol that exists that needs to be adopted for this. Examples are numerous. One protocol that was applied by many companies is certainly a design approach such as cradle to cradle, adopted by multiple organizations. And actually that famous bag, chip bag, I think, was from that protocol. It's so the Ehrman Miller, Ford, use those protocol to make sure that indeed we can easily take the product and reintroduce most of the product back into a cycle, and either a cycle that is recycling, or a cycle where it goes back to nature, so an organic part of the product go back to the nature. So what is promising? Well, again, the overarching principle of circular economy is certainly something to tap on. I think the consumers, the biggest customers in supply chain, so the big retailers, will ask more and more of the traceability of the product throughout, not just the life, the useful life, but also what happened at the end of the product use. And that will require either closed loop systems or solid supply chains, like these supply chains of partners that will help you to, one, recover the material, two, to reintroduce the material somehow in useful path.
Thank you very much, Professor, for explaining the concept for us, because we usually hear the expression from cradle to grave, which means the life cycle of a product from its creation to the disposal. It is clear from new concept that you mentioned that the product has a certain kind of regenerative design. So in order for us to understand better, could you please provide any examples of this cradle-to-cradle design?
Yeah, okay. From the cradle to cradle, it's pretty, the stories are pretty well known. So Ehrman Miller, for sure. When you're talking about, the closed loop supply chain, sometimes it's just a question of having the secondary market kicking in. So I recall, big furniture companies not taking back necessarily their product. So the steel case of this world, for instance, but they will. I'm not sure if they allow it officially, but they certainly don't put any big roadblocks to a third party to come in and reuse the office equipment or refurbish it and put it back to the market, probably to a lower tier market. So big companies like such as those big furniture companies. And
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this interesting example, Mr. Bashan. My next and last question to you is about some negative experience that companies might have. Because we already talked about, some examples of successful implementation of innovative green strategies in various companies like Pfizer, Amcop, Dell, and so on. But you know that we learn from successful cases as well, from cases when firms tried to implement sustainable strategies but made mistakes. So, what lessons could be learned from such failures?
Well, that's a big question, because you use the word strategy, and I'm not sure, if it's the appropriate word, but what we do see as failures are either part of the strategy, the implementation of the strategy, or specific projects. And I can certainly remember, several years ago where the best intentions were made to have a chip bag that would be biodegradable, but it turns out that the bag was making way too much noise. And it turns out that the company had became a laughing stock rather than being recognized for their good action of having a biodegradable bag. So long story short, most of companies will have a strategy that will work, generally speaking, but will be tarnished rapidly, or will be put down rapidly, simply by one part of the strategy not working well, or being accused of greenwashing. So a few years back, British Petroleum changed their logo. They put a nice sun on the logo, and they turned the color with a nice light green. And they said, well, we're a sustainability company, and we care about the environment. And obviously that doesn't fare very well when you get all kind of spill and accidents around the world. And so I would say that that will be the biggest failure I've seen in terms of strategy. But we get plenty of practices that are pointed as failure, not necessarily the entire strategy, but specific projects. And at the end of the day, there's, I would say, a good lesson to be learned from all this is to really look outside of the organization and really take a good pulse of what's going on there. And the failure will be determined not by necessarily the action you're taking, but how it is perceived, either by the consumers or the NGOs or the activist groups, and not necessarily on the internal actions you might take.
Thank you a lot, Professor. We really appreciate you sharing your opinion and your knowledge with us. It was a very fruitful discussion. Thank you very much. And while you're preparing your questions to us, now I would like to invite Professor Luis Carnier for our discussion. So, Professor, we have just discussed different innovative solutions such as circular economy, the use of robots in order to increase production efficiency and reduce waste, renewable energy, and so on. But according to the latest Dow Jones Sustainability Index, the front runners in corporate responsibility are mostly European countries, for example, the Netherlands, Denmark, Germany, Sweden. And regarding IT advancement, we can see large US companies. Taking these statistics into account, do you think that other countries, for example, emerging economies or the developing countries, could catch up with the developed world and address sustainability issues accordingly?
Well, yeah, I think that most of European and American corporations, they are present with their branches and units in South America, for example, and they follow the policies and the regulations, for example, for the stock exchange market that demands for companies that develop sustainability concern, and they have their policies in their governance corporation, or corporate governance, for example. So it's very important to us to discuss this at this moment, because there is really a big concern in Brazil and other countries, not only the corporate, but the public, for example. And I'll give you an example. The cities, the mayors of the main cities in South America, they have a signed agreement to invest in sustainability of air pollution, for example. No, take for example, I have some statistics, some information here. For example, in Bogota, Colombia, 80% of municipal budget redirect to construct mass rapid transport systems to run on clean energy, and in a city that boasts of the highest rate of public transport use in the world, for example. Even Buenos Aires, for example, replacement of 50 public buses, electric green buses, within a year, and upgrade the underground train system as well. The same thing in Brazil, city of Fortaleza in the north of Brazil, the commitment to reduce greenhouse emission by 20% within the next 10 years, and the creation of over 200 kilometers of bicycle lanes, dedicate bus lanes to help to entice commuters back to on public transport, for example. And we also have, the private sector is developing solutions in sustainability. For example, in Mexico, there's a very interesting subject. They created straws made of avocado seeds. That's very interesting. This is straws. They said that with avocado seeds, decompose in only 200 days. And this is very, very interesting. Turbines to save our oceans, I would say, was creation made in Ecuador. These systems, when you're in a boat in a river, for example, they can take all the plastic waste during the navigation. They collect about 80 tons of plastic from rivers every day, just to give an idea. And also we have another very good invention, the creation, development of a plastic bag, water soluble bags was created in Chile. The bag dissolved in water with no harm, and you can even drink the water, the author said, because it has no chemicals. The chemical formula of solo bags that they call contains polyvinyl alcohol, PVA, a material found and when they're analyzing the biodegradable detergent capsules, for example. So there is really a big concern about sustainability in South America, Latin America, and especially because we have our Amazon, for example, region. This is being the big concern today about sustainability, and all the attention now is taken for the Amazon forest, for example. I think Brazil and Latin America is really committed in this struggle to save the planet as European as the American companies does.
Oh, wow, very interesting examples. Thank you very much, Professor. And we will be back together in a couple of minutes answering questions that you're sending us live in the chat of our YouTube channel. Now we're moving to our next speaker from Europe, Professor Giacomo Bertolini, instructor of IBS Americas programs in cooperation with the QOA Business School. He got his master's degree in the Polytechnic University of Milan and has worked as a strategy consultant for more than 15 years. It is great having you with us today, Professor. And you are the author of the book called Building a Design-Oriented Company. So our discussion today was about how innovation can help reduce the environmental footprint. And our previous speakers already mentioned some examples of innovative design. For example, sustainable furniture, the parts of which are made of safe, non-hazardous material and can be even recycled. As an expert in product design, could you elaborate a little bit more about the possibilities of using design as a sustainability tool?
Yes, I certainly observed the need for the company to have a technological improvement about the sustainability. I would make a difference between what is passive sustainability and active sustainability. So passive sustainability is about raw material and about process, and active sustainability, which is directly related to design-oriented company, is about the product itself to be not just sustainable, but to contribute to the sustainability and to avoid pollution in the world. So that is, for instance, one example I have, it's working with the ceramic tiles industry, a company which created ceramic tile which can reduce pollution. So you can use a ceramic tile outside and it reduce pollution of the outside, or you can use it inside, and thus all the lifespan of the product will be useful to help reduce pollution. So it's not just about how the product itself was made in a sustainable way, but the product itself is contributing to the sustainability and to avoid the pollution of the world. Another case is more about the study from the companies about the customer journey, what they think is really important, really relevant. Because in the customer journey allow to understand what's going on and where to make improvements, specifically in sustainability. So this is the case, for instance, for a company called Ceres, which is a Danish company dealing with beers. They have a huge market in Italy, and they observed that their clients, basically younger clients, when they had an aperitivo, they were throwing away the plastic glass that they were using. So they asked me to make a design for glasses which are actually made out of glass, and the double aim was on one side to provide these glasses to the bars, and that the bars provided the glass to young people, then the young people could both or give back the glasses or even buy the glasses themselves, and on the other side another aim was for the company to increase their brand equity, because everybody see that that glass is the glass from Ceres. So the case in this case is something about the customer journey analysis and then the sustainability linked to what has been observed.
Okay, very interesting examples about glasses, but don't you think that this way the company increases its costs, since the glass is a more expensive material than plastic? And what are the other changes that are going to happen as a result of a costless sustainable solution?
I think this is very important, because sustainability in itself is not sustainable for a company if the company is not earning more money or repositioning herself. So the point is that I don't see anything bad, actually see it's a very good thing to have both the aim achieved. So you can reach a higher brand identity, higher brand image and higher brand equity, and at the meantime you are contributing to lowering the level of pollution in the world. Let's say that regarding the ceramic tiles, the point is that the ceramic industry is now something like a commodity. That is, that industries are trying to differentiate themselves, specifically using design and different materials and different size. So a tile which has that kind of characteristics is really different, and this helps to reposition the brand.
Okay, now it has become clear. Thanks again, Professor Giacomo. And what about, some sustainable solutions in businesses of probably a larger scale? Because recently some examples were mentioned in construction area. For instance, heat-reducing materials that decrease the need for air conditioning in buildings. Could you tell us a little bit more about this?
Well, I would talk about 3D printing, which I think is a very interesting technology for the future and which combines manufacturing and digital. 3D printing is not just very useful to print whatever the object, and today even big objects like houses and even bridges, at a fraction of the cost, but also at a fraction of the polluting of the environment. And what is very interesting about this is also that with 3D printing in the future we will have less and less footprints for transportation. So we will not pollute during transportation, because for instance, for the spare parts market, for instance for spare parts for cars, you will not need anymore to transport the spare parts from one country to another one, but you just transfer a file. So physically the object will not be transported, so this lowered the cost of the pollution footprint to zero. And that's, I think, it's very good news for the planet for the future.
That's a very good example. I would like to thank you again for your participation in our online symposium. Thank you. And now we're going to finish our first part of the event here, and we will have a 1-minute break. After that, Professor Carnier and I are going to be back to answer your questions live here. See you in a couple of minutes. Okay, we're back to our Green Innovation Day. Let's now see the questions that you've prepared for us, and we will start with those questions that had been sent in advance to us. So, Professor Carnier, our first question comes from Brazil, and one of our listeners said that there is a trouble in Brazil. Brazil transport matrix is nearly 63% dependable on truck transportation.
Yeah.
So it means that Brazil is dependable on fossil fuel. What about electrical energy? Can it be used as a sustainable solution?
Yeah, electrical system for trucks. Well, could be a solution, but at this moment it's very, very expensive. I don't think that in the short term we could use this alternative for the trucks. The solution for the trucks or transportation and pollution, everything, should be on the railway or railroad, as we say. So, taking these cargoes going through railroad. Brazil is building a long track to link the center part of Brazil, the production of soybeans, to the linking to the north of Brazil and the seaports that we have in Recife, in the northeastern part of Brazil. I think this would be a best solution for avoiding the pollution created by the trucks, and because I think electrical engines, or any other solutions would take time. Maybe it'll be developing this and could be a solution in the future. But don't forget, Brazil is a big producer of ethanol. Could be that engines by ethanol could be a solution as well, instead of electrical motors, for example. But I think, my opinion, we are talking about huge traffic of cargo, and all over the world, the best solution would be by railway or railroad, as you wish. I think that's to be the best way to solve this problem to us.
Yes, definitely. There are
Yeah.
several
And
alternatives.
more, let me tell you something. We are having a linking of a railroad between Brazil and the East Coast with the West Coast in Chile and Peru. We are building a track to link, both oceans. And I think you that asked me this question, you should investigate a little bit more. Probably you'll be surprised with that. Okay.
Interesting, yeah. Just before going to the second question, I would like to remind to everybody that we are also organizing a case study competition, and if you want, you can also participate in this competition. You just need to form a group. It can be your friends or colleagues from work, and then you register your group and you can take part. So we're offering $100,000 in scholarships for different international programs as an award for the best project. So let's see now our second question. So now we're going to talk again about some questions from Brazil. And the question is about the generations. So I believe that the generation of people who are watching us.
Yeah.
So can we say that this generation is more aware of a sustainable culture organizations than any other previous generations?
Oh yeah, you can see sometimes we learn from the kids, and that are calling attention about pollution. Don't throw the paper on the ground. So I think I'm very optimistic about the new generation. The new generation have a better consciousness about the problem of pollution or sustainability. They take, for example, in school, they are learning a lot about sustainability. And don't forget, those new generation will be the future of the world. And I think that those new generation have more they have more I would say um, they are more prepared for taking care of matters that we are discussing today, and we hope next time, in 10 years time, I think the world will be a better place to live, just because the new generation is worried about the problems that we have in today. Yeah, positively, yes. My answer, yes. I trust in the new generation as a solution for everything we are discussing right now.
Perfect. That's very good news indeed.
Yeah.
So, and the next question is about big companies. I think it's about like those solid corporations. So, how do you convince those large firms to change their business model and manufacturing process in favor of sustainability?
Sure. One of my expertise in management and teaching is corporate governance. And in corporate governance, we have today all over the world some policies to develop sustainable activities. For example, and sometimes for going to open the capital of a company, the company goes to exchange market. For example, the exchange market, they are only accepting uh, companies that have a policy on sustainability. For example, a reduction of pollution. Uh, um, what else? Respecting. Don't never work with the children. So products that are respecting the nature, and this is a way that companies should um, uh, get a better vision about innovation or about sustainability. And don't forget, we have also, I think, the ISO 19000 is about environment. So companies today, when you buy new products, for example, so the relationship between companies as a supplier and buyer, companies now are only accepting products that are produced by companies that respect the nature. So I think this is the way companies are doing to have a better world today. So companies, the private sector is being is looking for a better world. So I think that those private companies, they are respecting nature by law or by demands over their customer, for example. Yeah.
Good. Yes, and now I'm going to answer some questions that were sent live to
All
us
right.
in our chat. So the first question will be about the collaboration between big companies and startups, because as we discussed just now in our symposium about
Mm-hmm.
this collaboration, we can see that there are a lot of strategies like M&A. But this question is the following. So can big companies finance startups without absorbing these startups?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And there's a big move today in the world that big companies they are sponsoring, I would say, those startups. Sometimes are startups there's no relationship or no relation with the business of the big companies. But what's the idea behind? Is the idea of improving uh, new solutions, innovation, and sometimes by encouraging those companies, um, those small companies, to grow up and offer new ideas. Maybe that in the near future, these startup companies could do something in favor of those companies that I sponsor them. But this is a big movement today about um, helping big companies, helping small companies. I think it's a very big trend today.
Good. The next question is about a so-called thing, greenwashing. So
Greenwashing.
there is a big debate on that,
Oh yeah.
especially from big companies. And do you think that firms can turn sustainable just due to this popular pressure? Or
Hmm.
do these companies try to seem green lovers just to
Hmm.
receive the certificate?
Yeah.
And actually, we had many questions about this greenwashing
Yeah.
and seemingly loving nature companies from our listeners, so they're very interested in that.
Yeah, well, greenwashing could be used also for politicals. The politics. They have a big speech, a line speech. They talk everything that they want to hear. But companies, for example, they use that. I think they have a short. Uh, uh, they don't have a long plan by doing that. You know why? Because the employees will realize that this is just a speech. And today with the communication, the transparency that we have in the relationship between, as I mentioned before, between suppliers and customers, then this will be everybody when we're going to realize that this is just a speech. So greenwashing, I think, have a short life in the future. This is just the beginning, but nobody will believe that. You cannot keep a lie during a long period of time because they are lying to everyone, and this is not fair. And the people and employees will realize that this just a speech. I don't believe this goes so long as uh, someone can think. Well, in other words, you can say you have to practice what you do, or better say, you have to practice what you speak, what you promise, and the greenwashing. This is not the way to do business. Yep.
Yes, and the third question is again about Brazil. The question is, how can Brazil cope with sustainable growth, given that Brazil is right now passing through an environmental crisis?
Environmental crisis in Brazil. Well, I live in Brazil. I don't see this crisis. Oh my God. This is again the greenwashing, I would say, when people that are announcing that. Look, okay, let's talk about Amazon firings or other pollution in rivers, but I think it's all controlled. There's nothing extra that never happened before. So I would not say that we have a crisis. What we have is a point of attention that we have to take care of the pollution that we have, or even the Amazon forest that people are always mentioning. But I don't believe this is a crisis. This is a very good question because we are talking to other countries in the world. But let me tell you this is not true. Whenever you have news about Brazil, you have to look both sides. Don't trust in just one information channel. So let's take a look what's going on. The country is under control. I don't see that Brazil is in a crisis. I don't use the crisis for what's going on in Brazil. I think we have to have attention. We are having attention of the problems we have with the environment, but we are taking care of that. That's very important to mention.
Good. Yes, we have many questions, so probably I'm going to see here and choose the last one.
Yeah.
I'll just look through the
Unfortunately, no.
last ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so there is one about the economic slowdown because we usually associate sustainability initiatives with some additional costs or even limitations or pressures from governments. So
Hmm.
one of our listeners is asking, can the activation of innovation and entrepreneurship protect the national economy from the forecasted slowdown in economic growth? So we have sustainability and the slowdown in economic growth that everybody's talking about.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
could you give your opinion about
Yeah.
that?
When you have you have a crisis, or when you have a problem with slowdown, as we mentioned, that's the right moment for thinking about innovation. Is this the right moment for taking care of the problems that we are having? You have only two moments to change things. When you have a good position and when you have a bad position. I think this is the best way for increasing. Don't forget, when you have a crisis, you have to look. When you have difficulties, you have to look for opportunities. Because I used to say that this is a very important strategic thinking. When you have a crisis, that's the moment for look for new alternatives. So that's the right moment for looking for new things to do. Okay, that's my opinion. We have to look for new opportunities when we are in crisis. Okay.
Great. Yes. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for
Okay.
all the answers that you've given to us. And also thanks to everybody who watched us, who participated and sent questions to us.
Oh yeah.
I would like to remind that this symposium was organized with the support of the universities from United States and Europe. Please do not forget to participate in our case study competition. And that is all for today. Thank you for
Okay.
participating. Bye bye.
Bye.